Chapter 5 is entitled The Forbidden Forest. When last we left our intrepid explorers, Milo had inadvertently, accidentally, potentially told Quirrell that he and Hermione and Harry and Ron and Dumbledore, obviously, all knew that he who must not be named is alive. I mean, because it's obvious that he's still alive. Because plot requires that. So Quirrell volunteered to help deal with whatever was fighting the unicorns in the Forbidden Forest, and suggested it as a potential detention for students, because Quirrell knew that, Quirrell's argument was that students would be safe with him and Hagrid as long as they were in the forest, but it would scare the bejesus out of them. So they would hopefully be good from that point on. And he specifically requested Harry and Ron and Hermione and Milo. Gee, I wonder why. So that's what happened when we last left our explorers. And now we are getting into Chapter 5. The Forbidden Forest. They met Hagrid and the quietly quivering Quirrell Quirrell in the Great Hall. Hagrid, evidently some sort of half-giant ranger, was carrying a heavy crossbow. Milo was skeptical. Light crossbows were much more damage efficient, and carrying Fang's leash. Milo had carefully prepared his spells that morning, and avoided casting any throughout the day, meaning the Gryffindors started to be late for class again, as Peeves could harass them with impunity, and Milo was starting to appear rather useless in their lessons. Still, he wasn't about to venture into something called the Forbidden Forest without a full complement of spells. Mage Armor, he cast as soon as they approached the professor and the keeper of the keys. A thin, invisible field of force surrounded him like a second skin. It was far from complete protection, but it would help a little. Hagrid! Harry said happily. All right, Quirrell said. It's our job is simple. We're all to do is enter the forest and find whatever it is attacking the unicorns, he stammered nervously. And then return to Hogwarts so the headmaster and I can decide what to do. Sounds like a plan, Milo said, although he privately wondered why all the powerful wizards living in Hogwarts didn't just use some divinations to determine what was in the forest. Yeah, all right, Harry. Now, I don't know Hagrid, how to do Hagrid at all. Yeah, all right, Harry? Hagrid asked the Harry, who looked a little nervous, but determined. Milo was a little impressed that he'd volunteered for this. His friend was only 3 days into his wizard training. Milo hadn't, in fact, seen him perform any actual magic yet. Now that's guts, he thought. But smart. If he lives, anything we encounter will give him so much XP that he's bound to level up at least once. Let's be off then, Hagrid said, and led them through the grounds. Hogwarts sure looks eerie at night, Milo thought. A bit like Thamior's old place. Milo felt a brief pang of homesickness. Thamior was evil to the core, sure, but after the number of times Milo and his party had defeated him, he was practically family. Now I want to be clear. Anything happens. Anything at all. And you're to send up red sparks and run, you hear? Harry and Milo nodded mutely. Milo could do close enough with a dancing lights spell. And keep your eyes peeled, said Quirrell, and stick close. A soft breeze caused the chill night air to be quite clean and to bite clean through their school uniforms, and Milo pulled out a warm scarf and some wool gloves, fingerless so as not to interfere with his casting gestures from his belt of hidden pouches. Right, I'll take Harry and Fang. Quirrell, you can take Milo, Hagrid said as they reached the outskirts of the forest. What? We're splitting up? Harry asked. We've had experience with that before, Milo added. Best way to find what we're looking for, Hagrid said. Too big of a group and we'll spook it. Remember, run into trouble, send sparks. Well, Harry, Milo said, see you on the other side, right? Course, don't worry. I'm sure we'll be fine, Harry said. Milo was astonished. Was Harry trying to reassure him? You know, Harry, I think that one day, when you've gone up a few levels and get a few magic items, you'll be quite the hero. Good luck. The two groups split up and entered the forest. So, what are we looking for exactly, Professor? Milo asked Quirrell. We are not yet certain, Quirrell said. Something that's been attacking unicorns. Almost certainly some kind of animal. Keep an eye out for any unicorn's blood. It has a distinctive silvery color. Again, Milo had the nagging feeling that he'd failed a skill check. Quirrell had his wand at the ready. It felt like they'd been walking for hours, but Milo doubted it was more than half of one. Bet this is old hat for you, right? Milo asked, feeling slightly nervous. You probably charge into the Forbidden Forest every other week, fighting monsters and things? No, that's Hagrid's job. I've only been this deep twice before, Quirrell said. Oh, good. Wait, quiet. I think I heard something, Quirrell said. Best hide behind that tree. I'll investigate. Just stay down. Before Milo could argue, Quirrell ran off the path with his wand held out like a weapon, which Milo supposed it was. Milo shrugged and ducked behind a tree, which was covered in soft moss. He heard rustling in the darkness and debated whether to cast dancing lights to see what was going on. He eventually decided against, reasoning that the light might reveal some sort of monster sneaking up on him, but would certainly attract everything in the entire forest. Then he heard another rustle, closer this time. Okay, something is definitely sneaking up on me. He moved to stand up quietly, but found, to his surprise, that he couldn't. He appeared to be stuck to the tree. What the... Oh, gross. What he'd thought was moss turned out to be webs. He struggled against it vainly, but it was useless. He was stuck. Protection from evil, mirror image, invisibility. Milo cast in quick succession. He vanished abruptly, but 5 identical illusionary copies of himself remained. Classic Shellcon. None of the visible Milos were the real one. He hoped he wasn't jumping at shadows, because he just burned through most of his daily allotment of spells. He was mildly satisfied when one of his illusionary doubles was abruptly torn to pieces by a shadowy creature. The satisfaction vanished when he realized he was, illusions aside, stuck to a tree, being attacked by a monster that he could not see. Dancing lights he cast, sending 4 glowing red spheres into the sky above him. On the way up, they briefly illuminated, in red, horrible compound eyes and sharp pincers. Great, he thought. Giant spiders. His invisibility spell would end as soon as he attacked one of them. That is, if he cast any spell that included them in the area. So that ruled out glitter dust and grease, Milo's 2 favorite spells, but not creative use of levitate. He could move himself or up to 400 pounds of objects vertically, but not horizontally. Generally, the spell was used by wizards to escape, but Milo doubted it would pull him off of the webs. Levitate, he and all of his doppelgangers said. A hefty fallen log nearby Milo rose up slowly, ponderously, into the air a foot or 2. Another mirror Milo fell to the spider's attack, and Milo started to sweat. Seeing yourself being eaten by a giant spider in the dim red light while alone and trapped in a forest is, probably, one of the worst experiences a kid can go through. After, visiting the dentist. Milo then carefully reached into his belt of hidden pouches with his right hand, because his left was stuck in the webs, and withdrew an old adventurer's staple, 50 feet of silk rope and a grappling hook. The rope was invisible, but would cease to be as soon as it came to be more than 10 feet from Milo, and the log was about 12 feet away. Hopefully the spiders wouldn't notice 2 feet of taut rope appearing from nowhere. He awkwardly tossed the rope at the log and missed. Milo saw another mirror image wink out of existence, presumably hit by the unseen attacker. Milo looked at the fallen grappling hook lying uselessly in the mud and panicked slightly. Shouldn't help be coming, he thought. The glowing lights are up above me and everything. I prepared Mage Hand this morning. I wish I'd prepared Mage Hand this morning. His plan had been to lift the fallen tree up into the air and use the grappling hook to pull it over to above the monstrous spider, then drop it. He doubted he'd have time to pull the hook back and throw it again. Well, nothing for it. No sense in us both dying, Morty, he whispered to his familiar as he pulled him from his belt. Run back to Hogwarts. See if Hermione or Hannah want you to be their familiar. Good luck, old friend. Fear, despair, reluctance, he felt through their bond. Mordecai reluctantly crawled out of Milo's grasp and turned around briefly. Love, he felt, before the magical creature skittered off. Glitter dust, Milo bellowed. The spider, now covered in glowing dust, was huge. The hairy creature's legs spanned at least 15 feet across. The thing was blinded by the spell, but that would only last 24 seconds. Also, his invisibility was gone, and he was still stuck. He decided to try burning the webs off of him with prestidigitation. He might as well get set on fire, but he'd at least be free. Prestidigitation, he said, and a small jet of fire sprung out from his hands at the tree. But nothing happened. Milo was confused. He was sure that would work. Milo's only experience with webs came from the web spell, which was used frequently by his arch-nemesis Thamyor, and only bear passing resemblance to actual spider silk, but notably the magical webs burn rapidly when exposed to fire. Real spider silk, as Milo would know if he'd put any points into knowledge at all, is fireproof. Only 18 seconds left. The spider flailed about awkwardly, catching one of Milo's duplicates with one of his 8 hairy legs. The duplicate flickered and vanished. All Milo had left was silent image, featherfall, grease, and some cantrips. Grease, he cast at the ground under the spider. The blind spider's 8 legs flailed about, trying to get traction on the slippery ground, its pincers creating an agitated clicking sound. It managed to keep its balance, however. Milo had forgotten that creatures with extra legs get a bonus to stability. He felt, after casting, that it might have been more effective to cast it on himself, in case the spider tried to pick him up. 12 seconds left to live. Milo frowned thoughtfully. One effect of grease was that anyone standing on that slippery surface had to make a balance check to stay standing, and one effect of balance was that anyone who took damage had to redo the check or fall. The amount of damage didn't make a difference. Milo grinned. Acid Splash, he cast, and a pitifully small orb of acid hit the spider in what its face would be if it had one. Acid Splash was one of the most useless spells in existence. It hurt even less than just punching someone would, or even throwing a small rock. But Milo, as a conjurer, got an extra conjuration spell per level, and Acid Splash was the only 0-level conjuration spell in the multiverse. Milo had no choice but to prepare it every morning. The spider fell to the ground, and Milo had 6 seconds before glitter dust wore off and the spider could see. Milo gestured at the levitated log, still floating a little above the ground, and it flew up into the canopy. Hey, ugly, Milo said, reaching into his belt. Fear me, for I hold the mighty eldritch power of an 11-foot pole. He gave the fallen spider a light push, and it slid, slightly downhill, along the greased dirt, until it came to a stop in the slight depression where the log once was. The spider's vision returned as the glitter dust ended. It became stealthy again, the spider's dark brown carapace all but invisible in the darkness. Milo dismissed levitate. He couldn't see what happened, but he definitely felt the 600 XP he got for defeating a challenge rating 2 monstrous spider solo. Milo sighed. He was somewhat disappointed by that. He thought the spider was worth way more than that. Well, I guess the spiders here are pushovers compared to the ones back home, he thought. When Quirrell, Hagrid, and Harry found him, he was whistling softly to himself, stuck to the tree. "Milo!" Harry shouted, panicked. "Are you all right?" "Yeah, totally fine," he said, though in truth he felt a little woozy. "You managed to kill an acromantula?" Hagrid asked, shocked. "Aragog's not going to like this. We best be leaving." "What took you guys so long?" Milo asked dizzily as Harry pulled him out of the webs. "We ran into Quirrell, who was in a right state, said we had to help ye, but we were delayed by centaurs. Them stargazers took an unnatural dislike to our defense professor." Quirrell appeared to have lost his short-lived courage and was as pale and quivery as ever. "Centaurs? In a forest? I figured horsey types would prefer plains, not planes, mine, but of all the weird monsters." Milo's eyelids felt heavy and his head drooped slightly. He felt sort of numb all over. "Hagrid, I think something's wrong with Milo," Harry said to the giant. "What? Can't see anything in this ruddy darkness. Professor, could you—" Of course, Hagrid," Quirrell stammered. "Lumos." Quirrell held the tip of his glowing wand over Milo so Hagrid could investigate closer. It was hard to tell because of the poor lighting in Milo's black uniform, but there was a patch that seemed slightly darker than the rest. "Oh no," Hagrid gasped. "He's been bit." Milo frowned. He definitely didn't remember that happening. In fact, he was all but certain the acromantula never even got close enough to him to bite him. "Nah, Harry Brute never touched me," Milo said. "He's delusional from the venom," Quirrell said. "I feel terrible. He was my responsibility." "You're stuttering," Milo said. Something was nagging at him, but it felt as though his head were packed with wool. I always stutter," Quirrell stuttered. "We need to get him back to the castle," Hagrid said. "Acromantula venom can be lethal." "Poison?" Milo asked, and reached for his belt. He kept antitoxin in one of his pockets. Which one? It seemed like it should be important, but he was having difficulty focusing. I'll take him," Quirrell said. "You can keep searching." "Right. Harry, you best be going with them," the giant said to the boy who lived. "But then you'll be out there alone," Harry protested. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" "Nah, I got Fang. Don't worry yourself about me." "Wingardium Leviosa," Quirrell said, casting the hovering charm on Milo, who was starting to lose consciousness. Quirrell led Harry through the forest back towards the castle. "Shouldn't we hurry, Professor?" Harry asked anxiously. "Milo looks really sick." Quirrell shook his head. "Not in a forest," he said, "and certainly not in a forest in the dark. We could trip in just about anything, and then we would never even take longer." Harry supposed Quirrell had a point, but their leisurely pace seemed tortuously slow to him. Harry, frightened by the forest, gradually drifted closer to Quirrell as they walked. The defense professor was a bit spineless, but he seemed pretty competent with magic, and he had faced down vampires at some point. However, as Harry drew nearer, his scar began to ache abruptly. He doubled over, clutching at his forehead. When his hand drew away, there was blood on it. "Are you all right, boy?" Quirrell asked. Harry said as the pain gradually decreased. Yeah, I'm fine. It's nothing. It's just my scar hurts sometimes, usually around Snape. The scar, I understand you got it from from he who must not be named? Yes, Professor. That's what I'm told, at least. Quirrell frowned. Then I suggest you be wary around the potions master, he said. He used to be a Death Eater, I'm told. And this detention was his idea. Harry was surprised. He didn't like Snape, but he hadn't realized that the greasy professor had been one of Voldemort's followers. Maybe he was going to try and finish the job that the Dark Wizard had started? Perhaps it was Harry, and not Milo, who had been meant to be attacked by that giant spider. Good thing Quirrell had been there. As they continued to walk, Milo's condition worsened. He started babbling incoherently about his pockets and Quirrell's stutter, before passing out entirely. Morty scampered as fast as he could across the cold stone floor, which, considering he was a rat, more or less, was not terribly fast, towards the Gryffindor common rooms. Everything was going swell until he encountered the fell beast. The fell beast gave a cry of rage that would haunt Morty's dreams for weeks and charged. Morty tried to dodge, but the cat was too fast. Its claws left a bloody gash down the rodent's back. It would have been enough to kill a lesser rat, but Morty, as a familiar, had more hit points. Barely. He had half as many as his master, who unfortunately decided to dump Constitution at character creation. Morty climbed a suit of armor, rusty, the Gryffindors hadn't gotten this far yet, to escape the dreadful claws. He tensed and jumped over next to the next suit, barely catching hold of the helmet's visor. The fell beast, meanwhile, sat on the ground, debating what to do. He saw her tense up, ready to pounce, and Mordecai started to wish, heartily, that his master had taken the improved familiar feat. As the fell beast jumped, Morty let go of the visor and landed on the ground, painfully. The cat's collision with the armor toppled it to the ground, and it spread in pieces over the hallway. Morty evaded them easily, because improved evasion can be handy, and sprinted as the cat regained her senses. Terror, panic, despair, he felt through the empathic bond with his master. He rounded the last corner before the common room, and finally reached the portrait. The fell beast was hot on his heels. "Password?" asked the fat lady. "Squeak," said Mordecai. "Correct," said the painting, and swung open. He barely made it through the portal as the painting swung shut. He could clearly hear the irritated sound of the fell beast, hissing in frustration on the other side. There was a promise of pain and death in that hiss. Victory, satisfaction, triumph, he felt through the bond with his master. In the common room, he saw Scabbers eating some crumbs off the floor. "Squeak," he said to the ugly rat. "Squeak?" the appropriately named Scabbers asked, surprised. "Squeak! Squeaky, squeak, squeak!" Morty said urgently. Fear, pain, dizziness, he felt. Oh no, Morty thought. Has he been poisoned? Is he sick? Morty concentrated and tried to send strength through the bond. Every species of familiar had some sort of special power, and rats could convey a measure of resistance against things like sickness in their master, as long as they were within a mile. "Squeak," Scabbers said, and gave the rat equivalent of a shrug. Morty gave Scabbers a solid kick to the stomach, and then ran towards the girls' dorms. He had to find the one with the nice teeth. She was smart. She would understand. She would help. The problem was that all humans looked alike to him. "Squeak," he said hopefully to one, who woke up, looked at Morty, and screamed. Wrong one, he thought. "There's a rat in my room," she cried. "Lavender, wake up!" Another girl stirred irritably. "What?" Lavender asked sleepily. "Ah!" she screeched. The other humans all stood up out of bed while Morty looked at each of them carefully, trying to figure out which one was the one with the nice teeth. The fact that they were all screaming made it easier. "Hey, it's that rat Milo carries around all the time," said one. Hannah, in case you were wondering, not that Morty knew that. What's he doing in here? Lavender asked. Morty gave the rat equivalent of a sigh. This wouldn't happen if I were a mouse, he thought. Everyone loves mice. Squeak! He said urgently. He looks kind of distressed, Lavender said. Wait, is he bleeding? He should be with Milo, said one. And Milo's out in the Forbidden Forest. She frowned. We need to find McGonagall immediately. Milo could be in trouble, and his poor rat looks half dead. As she spoke, he could see her teeth. Good, rat-like teeth. Yes, this is the one, he thought, as his hit points went into the negatives. Thank you for everyone who's joined us this evening. Don't forget to... This is not the video that you're going to be needing to not forget this, but for those of you who are watching this on the YouTube video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Anyway. Shameless plug! Alright. This is taking way too long, Harry thought. Is Quirrell lost? Should be past the next few trees, Quirrell assured him. Then we'll be in open territory and can sprint. Harry was skeptical. He was fairly certain they were going roughly perpendicular to the castle, but then again he'd never been in a forest before. It was more likely that his sense of direction was misleading him. Still, he felt that the return journey should be faster than the trip out. They were taking all kinds of twists and turns while searching for the mysterious unicorn killer, but it had been at least that long since they'd left Hagrid. Harry gripped his wand, for all the good that it would do. His scar still ached somewhat, so he wondered if Snape was around, creeping in the bushes. Hello? He heard a familiar voice call out. Hagrid? Harry? Quirrell? Milo? Headmaster! Harry shouted. We're over here! Quirrell, Harry noticed, looked briefly frustrated before regaining his composure. Wait there! Dumbledore shouted. As the grandfatherly man approached, Harry could see a glowing red light coming closer. It looked like fire, but it felt oddly soothing. Quirrell shielded his eyes from the bright light, but Harry felt fine. Headmaster, the boy was bit by an acromantula, Quirrell said to Dumbledore, who had a red, glowing bird of some sort perched on his shoulder. He's been poisoned. Dumbledore acted quickly. Quirrell, take Mr. Potter back to the Gryffindor common room. Fawkes, Dumbledore said to the bird, take me and Milo to the hospital wing. There was a burst of red flame, and Dumbledore and Harry's friend vanished with a small puff of smoke. Showy, but effective, Quirrell noted. Milo awoke, staring at an all-too-familiar ceiling. I'm in the hospital again, aren't I? He asked weakly. I'm sorry that you are correct, young man, Madame Pomfrey said, and don't take this the wrong way, but it would be nice to go 5 days without seeing you. Milo laughed weakly. You'll note, she continued, that we left you with your magical belt this time. Your pet is on the bed next to you. Mordecai was lying on the bed over, wrapped in bandages. What happened to him? Milo asked, his voice full of concern. He was attempting to get the Gryffindor's common room, we believe, and was attacked by Miss Norris. He almost died, but Hermione got him here in time, bless her. His appearance was how Dumbledore knew to go looking for you. Milo frowned. Why did I need rescuing again? It all seems so foggy. You were bitten by an acromantula. It's a highly intelligent and extremely dangerous magical spider-like monster. You're lucky to be alive. It's the sort of thing I'd think you'd remember, she said. The bite wound had, largely, healed mysteriously during the night, much like his injuries when he'd first arrived. The venom's effects, however, lingered somewhat. No, Milo said. I definitely don't remember that. There was a spider, and I dropped a tree on it, but it never touched me. You're still very sick, and I'm sure it'll happen very fast. I wouldn't worry about it, she said, while pondering his words. He thinks he dropped a tree on it? Pomfrey thought. He is delirious. How long was I out? He asked. A day and a half, roughly. "We managed to stabilize you, but it took till this morning for Snape to brew the antidote," she said. "He worked all night, you know." Milo frowned. That story didn't add up at all. Something weird was going on. And that, ladies and germs, was the end of Chapter 5. Next chapter, Chapter 6, is entitled Crime Scene Investigation. Another section for shameless plug time. Thank you to all of our patrons, because you guys help make our crazy in our life possible, including getting a new microphone and a functional light. I appreciate everything that you guys do for us. And if you would like to help support the channel, either by becoming a patron or by purchasing us a jittery beverage, the links for all of that should be on my About page on Twitch. Chapter 6, Crime Scene Investigation. Throughout the day, several Gryffindor well-wishers came to visit Milo in the hospital wing. Apparently, word had spread of his run-in with the Acromantula, and the rumors had quickly gotten out of hand. "We heard you fought off a horde of giant spiders, mate," said one of the Weasley twins. Milo decided, for convenience sake, to call him George. "And save a beautiful unicorn princess," said, maybe, Fred. Which is unusual because unicorns tend to be male, and also managed to rescue Professor Quirrell, while growing increasingly weak from spider venom. Defeated you-know-who for good, became king of the goblins, found a philosopher's stone, so now you know you can live forever, discovered a 13th use for dragon's blood, and that you're still an available bachelor. But maybe not for long, based on the rate of these stories spreading. Following the conversation was somewhat dizzying, but sort of entertaining as well. Hannah and Lavender dropped by with candy, though the people in this strange land called them sweets, which Milo supposed was generally accurate, with the exception of several trillion flavors of the every-flavored beans, and Lavender apologized for her behavior during detention. Milo appreciated the gesture, but was somewhat suspicious of the wizardly candy as a whole. He remembered Harry's chocolate frogs trying to escape back on the train, and Milo shuddered at the thought of that mechanical monstrosity, and the more unpleasant flavors of those every-flavored beans. Hermione, naturally, brought him copies of her class notes from the ones that he had missed. Milo copied them all into a notebook, with Amoracious, which is an obscure 0-level spell that copies text rapidly, and then read it with Scholar's Touch, an invaluable first-level spell that reads an entire book, and not, say, a stack of loose leaf, in a few seconds. Ron approached somewhat sheepishly to apologize for not going to the forest with him and Harry, but said that it was really for the best, because he was absolutely useless around spiders and would probably have just gotten in the way. Milo forgave him, and they played a game of chess, which was just like regular chess, except the pieces were apparently intelligent. It really changes the game when, instead of sending a rook forward to be sacrificed, you're sending up an old, tired wooden soldier begging to be allowed to live and return to his family. He had a pair of pawns to take care of, after all. Yet nonetheless resigned to his fate. Ron won, of course, because Milo couldn't remember ever playing chess before. He knew the rules, oddly, but he had no memories of ever playing an actual game, probably because he was still cut off from any of his backstory not yet explicitly stated. While he recovered from his ability score damage, Milo tried to solve the puzzle of the spider bite. There was, without a doubt, an ugly injury caused by a fang in his side. However, Milo was absolutely certain that he hadn't been bitten. Even if the spider tried, Milo had mage armor and protection from evil, which gave him a net boost of +6 to his armor class, assuming that the spider was evil, which it totally was. It was improbable, though not impossible, that the spider had hit him in one attack, but between being blinded and off balance from Milo's magic, he really doubted the Acromantula had a chance, unless he'd been bit before Milo started his attack. But that was impossible, because Milo was invisible and had illusions up. Besides, he frowned. No, it really can't have been before I became visible, and probably wasn't when the spider was blinded. Milo could account for the spider's actions during the duration based on the number of mirror images it destroyed and the number of spells he cast. This doesn't add up at all. And then there was the matter of Snape. If Snape had been trying to kill him, then why did he brew an antidote? Was it really some sort of terrible, slow-acting poison that would kill Milo over the course of weeks, making it look natural? But why bother? He could have just left Milo to succumb to the acromantula venom. No, there must be another player at work here. Snape was evil, sure, but he wasn't actively trying to kill Milo. He may not have even realized it yet that Milo was a threat to him. "Hey, mate," Harry said, breaking him out of his thought process. Milo hadn't noticed the boy entering the room. "Sorry I couldn't come earlier. We had broomstick lessons. It turns out I can fly really well. I don't have any idea where that skill came from. I was always rubbish at PE. Anyway, Draco must still be mad from that time on the train, so he stole Nev's Rememberall. The poor fellow just got out of St. Mungo's and ran off with it. Anyway, I'm rambling. The point is, I got it back, but McGonagall saw, and guess what? I'm on the Quidditch team." "What? The game with 6 pointless players and 1 PC?" Milo asked. "Yeah, and I'm the Seeker," Harry said excitedly. "Hermione's upset because it's against the rules and thinks McGonagall shouldn't have made an exception, but Ron is beside himself." "Yeah, that's pretty cool. Bet you'll catch that snitch. Like, really, 10 gold pieces, gallons, whatever, that you win the first match by the skin of your teeth." "You're on, but I probably won't be able to pay you for a while when I lose. My money's all at Gringotts," Harry said. "Oh?" Milo asked. "What's Gringotts?" "It's this big underground thing full of dragons and run by goblins," Harry said. "I was there once. It was actually kind of scary." Milo's ears literally perked up upon hearing this. He was 1/64th elf. "Goblins got your gold, eh?" he said. Well, well, well. Sounds to me like we have a dungeon crawl in our future," he said excitedly. "What's a dungeon crawl? Is that some sort of dance?" "Oh, I've never really danced before," Harry said. "What? No, that's where you go into a big underground thing full of dragons and run by goblins and come out with piles of gold," Milo explained. "Oh, I've done that already," Harry commented, "though I left most of the gold behind for later." You did what now? I think we're not really getting into the spirit of the thing." "Well, I was with Hagrid, and he only let me take out so much." Oh, that makes sense. Higher level character. He probably did most of the work to get there. Still, try to argue for an even split next time. If you play your cards right, you could wind up way ahead of your WBL, Milo said. My what? "Your wealth by level," Milo said. "It's the average amount of total money in cash, magic items, fortresses, that kind of things, that a person has based on their level. So, like a powerful wizard can use a broom of flying to clean his floors with because he can afford 12, while a lower level wizard couldn't even get 1. "Oh," said Harry. "Here we just call it capitalism." "Weird. So, what's the deal with this Hagrid guy?" "Oh, he's a giant. He's my friend. He took me from the Dursleys and lives in a hut outside the castle. He takes care of the grounds and things. He actually sent me a letter inviting me down to visit him," Harry said. "I think I'll head down later this evening." "Huh. So tell me, did you notice anything weird about Quirrell's stutter last night?" Milo asked. "You mean 2 nights ago?" Harry asked. Milo nodded. He was still sort of disoriented from sleeping all day. Harry frowned. "I can't swear to it, but I think, just briefly, he was talking normally. Maybe he was so frightened that he sort of stuttered so far he wrapped around and came back on the other side?" "Yeah, maybe," Milo said. There was something he was missing. He was sure of it. His forehead wrinkled with deep thought. "Okay, hang on. Describe Quirrell to me and pretend I've never met him before today. Okay?" Harry looked at Milo like he'd gone crazy. Milo was used to that look by now, but he complied. Quirrell had a verbal tic, 1, wore a weird turban, 2, and was completely spineless, 3, but could apparently summon courage when necessary, 4. and emanated an odor of garlic. 5. "Oh my gods," Milo said. "How could I have been so stupid?" What is it?" Harry asked. 5 adjectives? Nobody gets 5 adjectives so soon after meeting them. "What?" Harry asked. It's just like on the train, remember? When I told you to write down everyone who could be described with more than 2 adjectives? That's why we go on adventures with Ron and not Dean or Seamus. The more unique a person is, the more important they are. "So what does this mean?" Harry asked. He was beginning to feel that Milo's sanity was much like Quirrell's stutter. It went so far through insane that it came out on the other side and started making sense. Kind of. "It means that Quirrell is big news, but it's too early to say yet which side he's on. I feel like there's something I should be remembering, but I just can't." "You mean, like your parents?" Harry said. "No, like something someone said in passing, but I didn't write it down." "Can I see your notes?" Milo asked. "What do you mean, like from herbology?" No, not those, the adventure notes." "Oh, sure," Harry said, pulling the list that Milo had asked him to write from his bag. There were lists of mysterious things people had said, of unexplained events, and of important characters. Milo pointed out Quidditch Seekers for PCs with some satisfaction, but otherwise the search was fruitless. Well, it was worth a shot. Maybe we'll hear that something that'll make sense out of all this," Milo sighed. "Until then, we just need to keep listening closely." His next visitor, after Harry left, was quite unexpected. "So we meet again, Malfoy," Milo said coolly. "Indeed, we do at that," Malfoy sneered. "I just came to see if you really were as weak, injured, helpless, and alone as they say." "Oh, are you threatening me? Is this really happening? Because as I remember, I got you 2 for 2, Slytherin." "Not a threat. No, not at all," Malfoy said and grinned. "Just thought I'd drop by, say hi, wish you well, and tell you that I know what you're up to." "What? I mean, you don't know anything, fool," Milo said, but quietly his mind raced. What was Milo up to? Not much, really. Just sort of blundering through encounter after encounter so far. Brute force being his only way through problems with magic. But active plotting? Not so much. "And more importantly, my father knows," Malfoy said. "And my father controls the Wizzigmot." Malfoy grinned. "I'd keep an eye on the morning paper if I were you." He moved to leave, but paused. "Fortunately," he said, "I am not you." Then he walked off, whistling softly to himself. "Well, that was cryptic," Milo mused to himself. "Starting to think I should maybe figure out what in Betor is going on before I wind up there." To do that, he'd have to go to the library. To do that, he had to get out of this accursed hospital bed. But that wouldn't happen until he'd healed to Madame Pomfrey's satisfaction.
All right.
"New plan," he said. "Bring the library to me." "He asked for what?" McGonagall asked. "He wants to borrow half the library," Madame Pince, the librarian, said calmly. "Said he didn't want to get behind in his studies, and that he would just start at A and work his way down to Z." Don't we have rules against this?" McGonagall asked. "Well, frankly, it's never come up," said the librarian. "Until Hermione Granger, nobody ever took out more than a book or 2 at a time. Most students only read when they absolutely have no other option, and even then, generally, only Ravenclaws." "That's just sad." "Well, I feel we have no choice but to allow it, save, obviously, those in the forbidden section," McGonagall said. "Lest we encourage rule-breaking among the students by example. I'll allocate a few first-year Gryffindors to help transfer the books, I suppose. You owe me a favor, though, Irma." The professors had started using Gryffindor's detention hours as the basis of a crude barter system. Snape had been selling them at a premium price, mostly to get out of his scheduled time patrolling the corridors of Hogwarts and dealing with Peeves. They were then resold between the professors in exchange for favors, assistance, and occasionally even money. The going rate was 3 nuts per hour per student, well below what minimum wage would be if the Wizarding World had a minimum wage. The students, of course, knew nothing of this. Scholar's Touch, Milo cast, and tapped a handful of books. He could read 4 books per casting, and he could cast the spell 9 times. Morty's head perked up as his brain, too, was flooded with information. Milo tossed his books into a rapidly growing finished pile and reached for the top few books in the to-read pile, which was less of a pile and more of a small mountain. Scholar's Touch, Scholar's Touch, Scholar's Touch. The next morning, Milo was finally allowed out of the hospital wing. He was still under strict orders to not exert himself and to avoid any undue stress. As a result, he was freed from the grueling labor that the teachers were forcing the Gryffindors to undertake by the way of detention. He walked, somewhat gingerly, down to the Great Hall for breakfast. As he entered, he made sure to affect an exaggerated limp and weak pace. He staggered towards the hall and pushed open the massive double doors dramatically. He was deliberately a few minutes late, ensuring that the enormous chamber was more or less full, thus maximizing his impact. Conversation in the room dimmed to a murmur as he walked silently down to the Gryffindor table and sat down between Hannah and Ron. "Hey," he said casually. "Did I miss anything?" "Nice entrance," said Ron. "Though I think you were missing some sort of dramatic announcement, like, 'That dragon won't bother us again anytime soon,' or possibly, 'The time has come.'" "Everyone's a critic," Milo sighed. "Don't be rude, Ron," Hannah said. "Or should I call Lavender back to have another little talk with you?" Ron's face paled, and he fell silent. Hermione, Milo noted, was very pointedly not speaking with Ron. Milo shrugged. The intricacies of most social interaction were lost on him, and they seemed largely pointless anyways. "I want everyone to keep a careful eye on Malfoy," Milo said. "He's up to something, but I'm not sure what, yet." "Sure thing, mate," Ron said as the owl post arrived. Milo questioned the hygiene of having a flock of owls flying in during breakfast every morning, but as he always ate from his perfectly sterile, everlasting rations anyways, he didn't mention anything. Also, owls? Seriously? A particularly large package was delivered to Harry, carried by 3 owls, working in unison. "Oh, that reminds me," he said to the Gryffindors. "Anyone got a copy of the Daily Prophet that I can borrow?" A flood of papers were offered to him immediately. Milo grinned. Celebrity had its perks, apparently. His newfound fame for defeating the Acromantula apparently overshadowed the hatred for losing 110 house points. "Thanks," he said, grabbing one from some random PC. He looked at the cover and nearly dropped it in surprise. Not because of the headlines or even the content of the newspaper at all, but because of the photo on the cover of some smiling blonde wizard being awarded a medal was moving. Someone out there saw fit to cast some kind of spell. Milo wasn't even sure what would do this, maybe some sort of illusion perhaps, on every single one of these papers. Oh, gods forbid, they were all magic items, each costing XP. If each newspaper cost even 1 experience point to make, Milo shuddered, imagining a soul-sucking factory needed to produce tabloids, where wizards were dragged en masse to be drained for their essence of power, left a shallow husk of themselves. Ugh. Milo shook his head to clear his mind and started scanning the headlines. Gringotts break-in still unsolved. Nope, not that. Lockhart saves Australia. Unrelated. Moody stops bicycle theft. Take no prisoners. Nothing to do with him, certainly. Harry Potter biography hits shelves. Shelves hit back. Apparently Flourish and Blots had attracted a malicious poltergeist. Nimbus 2000 named official broom of Chudley Cannons. Yawn. "Oh, by the way," Milo said as he read, "I found out what you know who was after." "What?" Ron sputtered. "How?" Well, I cross-referenced everything on Harry's list with everything in the Hogwarts library existing to extending one's life, he said, and the Philosopher's Stone is the only thing that appears in each. Nicholas Flamel was on the back of Dumbledore's chocolate frog card, which were invented in 1983. back on the Hogwarts Express, which was incidentally built in 1936, and he's the creator of the stone. Why does it matter that he was on the card? Harry asked. Well, something as important as the motives of the main villain would have been mentioned at least once by now, by way of foreshadowing, Milo said. Hells, you've probably been in the same room as the thing at least once and not even know it. Oh, Hermione said, sounding disappointed. Here I'd hoped, against all reason, perhaps, that you'd finally found an ounce of sanity and logic. Mark my words, Milo said. He's after the stone, or he's a vampire. Well, if it's the stone he wants, we don't have anything to worry about, Hermione said. Nicholas Flamel has it, and he's 700 years old. He's been able to keep it safe all this time. He must be pretty good at it. I mean, surely you-know-who isn't the first person to want to be immortal. I bet Flamel has to fight off dark wizards every other fortnight. Well, I'm glad that's settled, Harry said, cutting off Milo's reply. Wait till you guys see what I got in the mail. Harry was so excited he could hardly speak as he hurried to the Gryffindor common room to open his package. He skipped up the stairs 2 at a time and blurted out the password to the fat lady so quickly he had to repeat it twice before she was satisfied. It's a Nimbus 2000! Harry exclaimed. Don't be daft, mate, Ron said. Anyone who owns a Nimbus wouldn't just give it away. Oh, a broomstick, said Hermione. Hooray. I had one of those once, Milo said. Stole it from a Death Eater I defeated. Dumbledore took it, though. Course you did, mate, said Ron condescendingly. Course you did. Hey, Harry, Milo said. Tell me something. Why were you so excited to get this broomstick? It's a Nimbus 2000, Harry said, practically shouting. They're top-line racing brooms. Right, but how do you know that? Milo asked. Harry frowned. I saw one in the shop at Diagon Alley, he said. There was a crowd around it and everything. Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, Milo said to the red-headed boy, but aren't there a number of top-line racing brooms out there? Why, yes, but the Nimbus is the best one, said Ron. Sure, but still, there'd be ones that are used by, I don't know, national sports teams that still far outstrip those used by Hogwarts players, and are maybe almost as good as the Nimbus. Well, sure, Ron said thoughtfully. There's the Comet 480 and it's hush-hush, but apparently Firebolt's working on something really fantastic. Yet none of those, Milo said with satisfaction, were on Harry's list of notable items. The 4 fell silent. There's a perfectly rational explanation, Hermione said. McGonagall took Harry to Diagon Alley, remember? She must have seen it there. Milo laughed. Of course there's a rational explanation, if you look closely enough. Still bears thinking about, which is why we need to worry about this Philosopher's Stone. It just keeps popping up. When I was in Diagon Alley, Harry said excitedly, Hagrid took us to a mysterious vault in Gringotts, and all that was in it was a tiny package. I bet it was the stone. Oh, come on, Hermione said. That's just ridiculous. If it were the stone, Dumbledore would have gone himself, surely. He's the only one that Voldemort was ever scared of. But Gringotts was broken into that same day. But they didn't find what they were looking for, Harry continued. Remember, it's all over the news. They didn't find it because Hagrid took it to Hogwarts. Or maybe they just couldn't find it, or they were after something else, or Gringotts vault security, famed in the world, it employs dragons after all, was too good for them, said Hermione, with growing frustration. Wait. Is Gringotts some sort of bank? Milo asked. All of them gave him the usual look. If the security is so good, why is it overrun by goblins? Milo asked. The goblins are the security, Duffer, Ron said. They run the bank. It's their bank. It's a goblin bank. Milo couldn't take it anymore. This world is insane, he shouted. Goblins running a bank? Dragon hide gloves. 12 uses of dragon's blood? What are they, raised in farms? Elves? Cooking as servants? Wands? There's only one person in the entire country who makes your wands, and he's just allowed to wander about? What if he trips and dies, or some evil git? What the hell is a git anyway? Comes by and knifes him. What will you all do then? Also, Broomsticks? If you're all wizards, why can't you just cast fly? By Bigby, why don't you all just cast fly? You have infinite spells every day, and you let goblins guard your gold with dragons. More dragons. You have centaurs living in your forest. Centaurs! The only possible reason having 4 legs with hooves would be an advantage is if you were in the open plains. It's like someone who only had a vaguely heard of real magic got all the words right, but their meanings completely wrong. Are you about done, mate? Ron asked. 'Cause our magic is just as real. You see us using it every day. It's just a bit different from what you're used to. Yeah, I'm done. So, your resident dark wizard is trying to get the Philosopher's Stone. The stone is in Hogwarts. Dumbledore is guarding the stone, apparently. But just being in Hogwarts isn't guarding. Guarding is guarding. He'd have to be sitting next to the thing all day, every day, for it to be really safe. Seeing as how the other professors, perhaps with the exception of McGonagall, are completely useless, dead, or downright evil, that leaves us. Leaves us for what? Ron asked. When Voldemort, oh shut up Ron, it's just a name, makes his move, we have to stop him, Harry said quietly. He killed my parents. He's killed a lot of people's parents. We need a plan though. I'd just like everyone to realize that you have nothing remotely concrete, Hermione said. The world doesn't work that way. You know who is dead. Flamel has the Philosopher's Stone. Professor Snape is stern and sometimes maybe a little unfair, but he is not evil. Until you can prove even one of those statements is wrong, you can do this without me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have Transfiguration homework, as you do, in point of fact. With that, she stood up and strode out of the room. You know, she has a point, Ron said. What we have is a bit thin. Mind, Snape's evilness is pretty self-evident. Right, well, I think someone tried to kill me the other night, Milo said. And even if I can't remember it happening, I'll find out how. Tomorrow, when I've got my spells back, I'm going back into that forbidden forest. Something's not right. The forest, with the giant spiders, the werewolves, and I know it's not a full moon, the human-hating centaurs, That's actually all I can remember, but I'm sure it's just the beginning, Ron said. Unicorns, Harry said. And things killing the unicorns. And why? Milo said, I don't know yet. Even Scholar's Touch had limitations. Each one allowed him to read 1 book per level, so 4 books for those of you keeping score back home. But he could only cast so many per day. He resolved from that here on out, whenever he had extra spells remaining before going to bed, he was going to burn them on Scholar's Touch until he learned everything there was to know about this zany campaign setting. Seriously, he thought, this place makes Eberron look as familiar as foreign. But I can find out tomorrow, or maybe the day after. Right. Once you can prove it was Snape who tried to kill you, and come on, it totally was, then Hermione can help, and she probably already knows loads about unicorns and things we don't even know to look for, Harry said. Meanwhile, Ron and I are going to try to find out everything we can about the Philosopher's Stone and Nicholas Flamel. He's a 700-year-old wizard, right? I bet he's really famous. Yeah, Ron said. He was like the Dumbledore of his age. I heard he's the one who trained Dumbledore. He might well be the most powerful wizard alive, really, if he hadn't retired. That kind of takes you out of the running, retirement. Fortunately, the next day was Saturday, so Milo didn't have to worry about using his spells to bluff his way through class. Instead, he prepared the same combat spells he did on the trip to the forest the first time, and set out. This time, there would be no one to rescue him, so he went in the middle of the day, protected by his invisible mage armor. Locate object, Acromantula corpse, he cast, swapping out mirror image. As far as the magic was concerned, a dead creature was an object, unless it was undead, of course. You know, he muttered to himself as he followed the path set out by the spell, I think I've realized why I'm having so much trouble here. I was really designed to neutralize a horde of enemies so that Zook and the others could take them out with pointy sticks and things, he said. My spell selection was never designed to win fights solo. Now that he thought about it, Milo realized that he hadn't had anything actually, lethal. Just sort of annoying. The other thing about this crazy world, he complained, There's no wizards. I mean, none of these people who call themselves wizards, but they're really more like warlocks gone wrong, but no proper wizards. No wizards meant he couldn't copy spells for any amount of money, which is why his selection was still so limited. Every level, all wizards learned a mere 2 spells from independent research. It's all so unfair, he muttered. I have to reinvent the wheel every time I want to learn a new spell. Ah, here we are. He turned a somewhat familiar corner and felt the angle of the locate object change suddenly, meaning he was close. It all looked so different during the day, but there was the web-covered tree. He couldn't believe he hadn't noticed it during the night. There really was a lot of web everywhere. He cautiously approached the remains of the monstrous spider. Were Milo a normal human, he would be repulsed by the smell, but Milo's nose, like those of everyone from his world, only picks up plot-sensitive scents. The rest were just assumed to be there, but not explicitly mentioned. If Milo had thought that the acromantula would look less frightening during the day, he would have been wrong. It was enormous. His estimate of 15 feet across was wrong. It was closer to 25. Milo shuddered. Aha, he exclaimed. That thing is way too large to have been killed by that little log I dropped. The log weighed at most 400 pounds, because that was as much as Levitate could carry, and it only dropped 20 feet, which was the furthest he could raise it in one round that he had to do so, meaning it only did 2d6 damage. That's 12, max. And if acromantulas are anything like the monstrous spiders back home, then it would have had 24 hit points minimum, but probably closer to 52. It should have shrugged that off and bitten me in half. Milo frowned. There was more, too. Even if the spider was only a CR2, he should have had somewhere in the vicinity of 22 hit points, and Milo only did, maximum, 12 damage. Actually, he added mentally, 15 with the acid splash, but the odds of that happening are slim, only 1 in 108. He shouldn't have been able to kill even a CR1 monster spider with all he did. And from what the people around here have been saying, acromantulas are dangerous, like really dangerous. From that alone, he would have thought that they were challenge rating 4 or more. He moved closer to the body to investigate it. It was, clearly, quite dead. So what happened to you, big guy? Were you already wounded? Expose the dead, he cast, switching out levitate. This was a spell the good people of Eberron had developed, but it had been carried to Milo's world by powerful spellcasters using plane shift. He never actually seen it done before, and had no idea how to cast it, but spontaneous divination let him do it anyways. Best ability ever. Anyways, the spell gave him a gigantic bonus to search crime scenes, and it let him discover clues as if he were a trained professional. Some quick math told him that he'd have to be able to beat DC 15, easily given his massive intelligence and the bonus from the spell, to find a clue, if there was one, and then 21 to figure out any information from it. He frowned. It would take a 26 to find out everything he needed, and that was beyond him without more magical assistance. Master's Touch, Instant Search, he cast, this time in favor of grease and glitter dust, respectively. He was starting to worry that he was going to run out of spells before he was done. The spells, together, gave him another +6 to his search. Details of the spider's corpse, really more than he wanted to know for that point of fact, suddenly appeared in his mind as if he diligently investigated the body. Details of the spider's corpse, more than he really wanted to know, in point of fact, suddenly appeared in his mind as if he had diligently searched that body. Aside from a few long-since-healed scars on its side and face, a sprained ankle? Do spiders have ankles? Minor acid burns dealing burning and 400 pound of tree sitting on it, the spider was in perfect health, except that it was missing one of its fangs. Well, Milo said triumphantly, this explains wait a minute, no it doesn't. Can acromantulas shoot fangs? Why didn't I feel it? I know I didn't take any damage. Milo was aware at any given time how many hit points he had. Well, he said, you weren't a wounded high CR monster, or I would have found other entries. You weren't CR1, or I would have gotten less experience points. You weren't weak to acid, or there would be more serious burns. There's only one possible conclusion, and it changes everything, he said, pausing dramatically for the scene to change. Dun dun dun! Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that was the end of chapter 6. My goodness, what a story. For those of you who are joining us this evening at this part, Harry Potter and the Natural 20 is a mashup of two of my favorite things in the world, Harry Potter and Dungeons and Dragons. It is a story in which Milo, a wizard from the Dungeons and Dragons universe, gets dropped into the Harry Potter storyline. And what has happened so far is Milo got summoned. They figured out he's got to be some kind of wizard because he can cast magic, but we don't understand how it works. And placed him in Hogwarts, and now he has met the trio and is now a quartet? Yes. It's been weird. It's been fun. It's been enjoyable as all get out to see how the interaction of one character, the introduction of one different point of view, can change everything else. But this author does a great job of sticking to the regular story. The Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone sticks to it so well, except for the tiny changes, that occur because you've got someone like Milo who loves to metagame and throw sticks into the spokes of his particular bicycle. Loving this story. And we will be reading it again. We will be starting chapter 7 next week on Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel, which is 8 p.m. Pacific time, because I live in the Pacific time zone. I also stream Mondays. I have absolutely no idea what game I'm going to be streaming on Monday, but I'm going to be streaming on Monday as well. And I am proud to announce that Itty Bitty Kitty Committee, the RPG that we are beta testing right now, is going to be switching from Balsamic Games' channel to my channel. So the Itty Bitty Kitty Committee will be hanging out here on Thursday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So all 3 of the things that I am on are now going to be streaming on this channel. So if you haven't checked out the Itty Bitty Kitty Committee before, please come, enjoy, deal with our crazy. We are chaos personified. And if you haven't heard of Children of Midnight, it's like Leverage meets Dresden Files with some serious like Big Brother vibes as well. Yeah. And I play a mad scientist who's an artificer and very insane. So yeah, it's a blast if you want to come for that. And I honestly have absolutely no idea what game we're going to be playing for Magical Monday, but we will be playing something here on Monday as well. You guys are really helpful for my sanity, and I don't know how to explain it to you other than that. So thank you for being here with me. I hope you all have a wonderful night, an amazing weekend, and know that I love you. I really, really do. Good night.